Hey, what's up guys? So, it's been a little while since we've sat down together to talk about radar detectors. As you know, my daughter was born recently, about 7.5 weeks ago or so. I did a video about that. But now that I'm starting to get back into the swing of things, I wanted to go ahead and do an updated version of new and updated radar detectors. I've been, of course, very busy the past couple months, but here and there I've just kind of been keeping my eyes out for all the changes that have been going on. And the last time we did this video was back in June. And so now I want to go ahead and cover pretty much the last 3 months worth of updates. We're going to be talking about new radar detectors. We're going to be talking about radar detectors that have recently been updated, and we're also going to be covering different laser jammer updates. And then at the end, I also want to share some really cool test results that have been shared by people, pretty much you guys going out and doing testing and learning some really cool things, and I wanted to highlight some of those tests and share them with you as well. Now, the next video that I'd like to do after this one, we're going to be covering the top 10 best windshield mount radar detectors on the market. This particular video is going to be going over all of the new and recent updates that we've seen over the past couple months. Now, starting off, let's start with the Uniden R1 and R3. Firmware 1.50 is now out for the R1 and the R3, and it adds K-block functionality, which is basically a filter to help filter out BSM falses from Hondas and Acuras. It's pretty much filtering out 24.199 plus minus 5 megahertz or so, and so any signals, legitimate or false, most of the time false, will be blocked completely with this filter enabled. Now, we've had the filter for a little while on the Uniden R7, and now it's being brought over to the R1 and the R3 as well. 1.50 also adds a fix for a simultaneous detection of red light camera or speed cameras, as well as radar alerts. Now, performance-wise, some testing's been done with 1.50, and we haven't seen any sort of changes in performance, good or bad, and so performance-wise, it should be the same. Pretty much people are finding with the new K-block filter, the detector is much, much quieter, especially considering how many Hondas and Acuras there are, and the detector now will do a much better job at filtering those out. Now, we have been noticing that there's still some BSMs around 24.162 or so from Hondas and Acuras, but the majority of them are going to fall right around 24.199, which is where the K-block filter is going to work. I know some people might ask about what about doing a filter for that range. At that range, we're starting to get super close to where K-band is normally operating, 24.125 or 24.150, and so this K-block feature, honestly, I think it's kind of a dumb hack because the detector is not sophisticated enough to tell the difference. There's no detectors, I think, except for maybe the Redenso Pro M that can tell the difference, and so this is something that Uniden is doing in the meantime to help filter out one of the most common sources of BSMs. Next, moving on to the Uniden R7, a lot of you guys have been asking about auto lockouts. It's something that we were told when the R7 was launched that one day, well, we were told in the first firmware update that it would be available, but there's been a number of firmware updates since to add new features, fix bugs, things like that, and we still don't have auto lockouts. Now, I've asked Uniden many times, what's the deal with auto lockouts and when is it going to be coming out? I still haven't gotten an answer from them yet, and so as soon as I have more information, I'll definitely share it with you, but it's something that I've been wondering, and I know a lot of you have been wondering as well. There's been a lot of speculation as far as patents and a bunch of other stuff as far as what's going on, but right now I don't have any ETA for auto lockouts. Yes, the detector is designed to support it. No, the R1 and the R3 don't have enough memory to do that. It's going to be just coming to the R7, but someday, hopefully, it better actually come over to the R7. Next, moving on to Escort. Let's start with the Escort Max 360C. This is probably now my favorite Escort windshield mount radar detector. It does have a couple issues though. Now, as I was sitting here actually editing this video, Escort just released an update that addresses the issues that I was just about to tell you about. Firmware 1.10 is now available for the Max 360C, and it solves 3 primary issues. Now, the first thing is it's a fix for the lockup bug and hopefully also the sleeping bug. There's been an issue with the 360 series detectors where sometimes when they detect radar, they can actually lock up and stop detecting radar any longer. So the signal basically just gets frozen on screen. Now, there's been several updates to attempt to fix this, and Escort has progressively improved this issue, but they haven't resolved it altogether, and hopefully, fingers crossed, 1.10 fully eliminates the issue here for the 360C. Now, there's been another issue that people have been reporting recently. It's very similar. It's kind of a sleeping issue, and instead of locking up when it's detecting a signal, it pretty much is just unable to detect anything at all. It looks like it's turned on, the display is on and everything, but it's not actually alerting to any radar signals, legitimate or false, and hopefully this firmware update helps to address that issue as well. Now, the second fix is an improvement for laser falsing. The previous firmware update, 1.9, actually introduced some additional laser falses. Driving around, I would get maybe 1 to 2 laser falses per hour with the 360C with 1.9, and now 1.10 should hopefully address this. And then finally, the third update has to do with some KA falsing. Some people were experiencing false alerts on KA band, particularly in the rear. You could deal with it by using KA band segmentation and just segmenting those areas out because they weren't actually on legitimate police radar frequencies, but 1.10 should help address that as well. Now, another good thing to note is this same update is available for the original Max 360. It's firmware update 1.11 or 1.8, depending on what version of the 360 you have, as well as the Bel GT-360. It's firmware 1.3, as well as the Cobra Dual Pro 360. It's now firmware 1.1. So the same updates are available for all of Escort's 360 series detectors. And so now with that said, let's get right back into it. Next, moving on to the original Max 360, there's been some weird stuff going on here. I've been seeing that most distributors are no longer able to sell the original 360. It's only available from places like Escort's website directly, Amazon, and Best Buy. Those are some of the biggest retailers, but a lot of the smaller ones that you guys know, Best Radar Detectors, etc., are no longer able to sell the 360C. It's just the newer 360C that they're carrying. I'd asked if that means that the 360 is going to be phased out and discontinued, but from what I've been told, that's not the case. Additionally, the price of the original 360 is actually going up from $500 to $550. Usually when detectors are on their way out, the price starts to drop to kind of clear out old inventory, but we're actually seeing the price go up for the original 360, which is kind of weird. Now, the newer 360, it's on sale currently while I'm doing this, down from $650 down to $600. So currently, there's only a $50 difference between the original 360 and the newer 360C, and for the extra $50, I definitely think the newer 360C is worth it. Now, I don't know if the price change is permanent. Escort's prices do fluctuate from time to time, and so right now there's a $50 difference, but normally there's going to be a $100 difference, and so that's kind of one of the weird things we're seeing with the 360 is that it's only available now from some of the bigger distributors, and the price of it is going up. Next, let's take a look at the Cobra Dual Pro 360. This is pretty much repackaged Beltronix GT-360, which I've done another video talking about in the past. This detector, it's based on the same platform as the Escort Max 360, just with a different display. The arrows are built into the OLED display instead of separate arrows over on the right-hand side, but pretty much has all the same functionality as far as, well, arrows, auto lockouts, Bluetooth for Escort Live, which Cobra calls iRadar. But yeah, there's the new Cobra Dual Pro 360, which is a repackaged Beltronix 360, which is a repackaged Escort Max 360. So yeah, Escort and Cobra, they're kind of sharing a lot more technology now. Now, something else that's new from Cobra, and personally I think is a little bit more interesting, is the Cobra Road Scout. This is a detector that actually combines a dash cam into the detector in one integrated unit. Unlike the Escort M1, which attaches onto the side of an existing standalone radar detector, this dash cam is actually built into the radar detector, so you have both the dash cam and the radar detector in one single package. The radar detector itself, it's based on the Cobra DSP 9200BT, which was a surprisingly good performer, and the BSM filtering was actually pretty good as well. The dash cam itself, it's a 1080p dash cam. Pretty simple. There's no parking mode or anything. It's just meant to put it on your windshield and it records while you drive, which makes sense because radar detectors are designed to run while you drive as well. But yeah, Cobra has the new $450 Road Scout, which is a radar detector dash cam hybrid. Now, on the flip side of new products coming out, we've got the Escort Solo S4, which is actually now being officially discontinued. This is Escort's top-of-the-line cordless detector, and well, now it's going away, and to be honest, good. It was kind of a turd of a detector. I know a lot of people like the convenience of the cordless stuff, but there were so many issues. The performance was awful. It would confuse K-band and KA-band a lot. I was just really unimpressed with the detector. It hasn't actually been updated since the Solo S2 from years and years and years ago. They're just kind of repackaging the case and stuff, but it's actually a really, really old detector that hasn't been updated in forever, and so it's being discontinued. I don't know if there's an S5 in the works. Hopefully there is, to add at least basic performance, some BSM filtering. This doesn't have any. Maybe GPS could be added. I don't know about the battery stuff, but something to at least bring it up to par. TSR doesn't even exist here, and so there's a lot of things that could be added, so we'll see if they ever come out with the Solo S5, but really, right now we just have the discontinuation of the Solo S4. Moving on to the Redline EX, the current firmware version is 1.15, and there's really no changes with 1.15. According to Escort, it's just running changes, and features and performance are unaffected. Now, one thing that we are definitely waiting for is auto JTK support to Escort's windshield mounts compatible with the ZR5 and the ZW5 laser jammers. That feature has been added to the MaxCI 360 to where you can tell the laser shifters, what Escort calls the laser jammers, to automatically disarm after a set period of time. 4, 6, 8, 10 seconds. That feature is supposed to come over to the windshield mounts like the Max 360C, the Redline EX, etc., but it's not available yet, and it hopefully does come out soon. Next, taking a look at the Uniden DFR7, there's a variety of different firmware options that are available for it. On the website, if you go take a look, you'll see firmware version 1.10e. Now, it's not in its usual place, but if you do a search on Uniden's website for the DFR7, you'll actually find a link to download 1.12e. Now, 1.10 and 1.12, they're functionally identical. There are some small changes under the hood, but they don't affect performance or functionality in any way, and so whether you have 1.10 or 1.12, it's going to be the exact same thing, and at this point, 1.12 is going to be the final update, we're being told, for the Uniden DFR7, especially now that it's being replaced by the DFR9. The DFR9, we're starting to see some price reductions in it, which is great because I think $329 was a little overpriced for the Detector, and so now you can find it a lot cheaper. I'll link to it down in the video description, along with all the other detectors where you can pick it up. And same thing with the DFR7, you can actually get it for $129. You do need a special discount code, I'll link to that as well. But yeah, we're starting to see some discounts on some of the less expensive detectors, especially from Uniden, which is really nice. Now, another quick tip for you guys running a DFR7 or DFR9. If you take a look, the latest red light camera database on the Detector hasn't been updated in a while. However, you can use the Uniden R3's database to update your DFR7 or 9. If you go over and download the latest firmware update, 1.50, for the R3, when you open it up, you'll see a file inside for the red light camera database for the R3. Then if you go and download the database update tool for the DFR7 and 9, you can load in the file from the R3 and copy that over to the DFR7, and it'll go ahead and update your Detector to the latest red light camera database. Next, moving on to Stinger. There's a new firmware update for the Stinger VIP. It's 4.6.02. In this update, it brings some radar performance improvements as well as some general bug fixes. Next, moving on to the Radar DSP, we're now at firmware version 111.207. This basically brings also some minor bug fixes as well as some improved MRCD detection capabilities. The big change, though, is going to be in concert with a new version of the ALP CPU. This is going to be adding a new feature called the Assisted Radar Feature, or ARF. Did I say feature or filter? Filter. The Assisted Radar Filter. Now, the Assisted Radar Filter is designed to do two primary things. The first thing is it's designed to help you filter out BSMs being emitted from your own vehicle. So if you're driving a car that's constantly causing your own radar detector to false, this is going to give you pretty much in-car BSM filtering. The second thing is it's going to give you some additional BSM filtering against some vehicles that the detector is not otherwise able to filter out. The way that this works, it's pretty much a slightly more sophisticated version of K-band segmentation. The idea is when you come across a false alert, whether it's coming from your own vehicle or maybe another vehicle nearby, you can tell the detector that this is a BSM that you want it to filter out, and it will basically lock out this K-band range. It's about 5 megahertz or so, plus minus, and it also takes into account signal strength. So let's say you want to filter out a weak BSM, it'll filter out this weak BSM and all the other ones next time you see it in the future. But if you see another signal down the line, even if it's the same frequency, if it's much stronger, say a police radar gun, it will alert you to that, even though it's kind of segmented out this K-band frequency range, which is pretty cool. It makes it safer than just a traditional K-band segment, something like, well, K-block for the R1, R3, and R7. Now, in order to get this feature, you do need the new hardware 4 version of the ALP CPU. This CPU, it's actually black instead of kind of whitish gray. Additionally, besides the new CPU, you're obviously going to need a Radar DSP, not the original Radar, a GPS antenna, as well as the Bluetooth module to pair with your phone, because you do all the teaching process stuff with your phone, though once you teach it with your phone, even if you're disconnected, if you're running on Hi-Fi or the standard control pad, you're still going to get the assisted radar filter functioning even without the phone. And I've got a link in the video description that goes over all this kind of stuff in more detail, how you use it, how it works, things like that. But that's the big new update with the Radar DSP. Now, additionally, with the ALP CPU, the price is actually going up. With the new hardware 4 CPUs, the GPS antenna is required even if you're not using any TX sensors. Before, if you were using all regular sensors, you didn't necessarily need to get the GPS antenna, but because you do need the GPS antenna with the hardware 4 CPUs, that brings the ALP price for a standard set of duals up to $839. So the price of a standard ALP is going up, but most people are going to wind up getting a GPS antenna anyway, so ultimately this actually isn't going to affect a lot of people, but it is something to be aware of as far as the starting price. Now, speaking of the ALP, the current firmware version for that is 5.5.6, and there's a new option in the ALP software to where you can actually have it do independent JTK functionality for the polyscan. If you look in the settings now, you'll see a new option called Laser Scanner Override. And this basically allows you to get unlimited jam time against the polyscan, which is a fixed photo LiDAR gun that's in use in Maryland and a couple places around the world. With this feature enabled, you can get unlimited jamming against the polyscan while having automatic JTK functionality enabled for your maybe other laser sources like your handheld laser guns. Next, let's talk about the Valentine One. So the V1, this is a detector that's been out of stock since the end of March or so. So it's been about 5 or 6 months since you could buy a Valentine One. And since then, there's been hundreds and hundreds of comments and discussion and speculation and people trying to figure out what's going on. Are they going out of business? If you call V1, they're pretty much what they're saying is they're waiting on parts for an updated version of the V1, parts coming in from China. Now, are they parts for the existing V1? Are there going to be any updates coming? Again, we've been hearing different things depending on, well, they're just telling different people different things. Some people are hearing that maybe the Bluetooth module is going to be integrated into the detector. Some people are hearing that maybe there's going to be a new display for the V1. And I actually did a video a couple years back in 2015 going over the information in the patent that V1 made. And maybe we're going to actually see the new V1 based off the display shown in this patent. Maybe there's going to be GPS introduced. I kind of doubt it, typically due to patent limitations. Some people are saying there's going to be maybe some parts that they're waiting on for the mute levers and whatnot. Again, nobody knows what's going on, but they keep saying 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Until they get more V1s in, but they've been saying that literally for months.
2 weeks.
So we have no idea, honestly, what's going on with the V1 or when it will be available again. But hopefully it's actually 2 weeks, and actually hopefully as soon as I finish shooting this video, the V1 shows up and it's finally available again. Next, I want to talk about JBV1. JBV1, it is an Android app specifically for the V1. It's created by John Boy, so John Boy, Valentine One, and it's an amazing app. It is by far the coolest app that I've seen for any radar detector. Now, it's currently on version 1.8.2, and it seems like there's a new version that comes out literally every week because John Boy is doing an amazing job of listening to people on the forums and adding features and fixing bugs and just creating a bunch of cool stuff based on our feedback, which is amazing. Now, again, there's been tons and tons of updates because they happen so often, but some of the recent updates are things like it's available without a Valentine One, so even if you don't have a V1, you can still get most of the functionality available. For example, there's things like crowdsourced alerts to where it can let you know when there's police spotted in the area, as well as when those alerts were not only reported, but also confirmed by other drivers driving by more recently. There's aircraft alerts that let you know when police are running helicopters or aircraft in the air, planes, also issuing speeding tickets. You can get weather overlay information. You can get red light camera and speed camera and even the speed limit information displayed on screen. There's a bunch of really, really cool stuff. And of course, for the V1, you've got auto lockouts and low speed muting, and you've got stuff as far as how it can tell you if it's detecting a Honda or an Acura based on the frequency, or specific filters for GMs if it's seeing two signals 100 megahertz apart. Like, there's a bunch of really, really cool stuff that's being built in there that isn't actually available in any other radar detector. Now, with JBV1, I could do an entire video on just that app, and I actually plan on doing it. I've been spending the past week or so running the V1 with JBV1, and I've actually got a thread going on RDF talking about all the coolest features that actually want to kind of talk about ahead of time so that I can use for the video. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in the app, and yeah, if you haven't checked out that app, I would definitely recommend it, especially now because it's available for being able to be used without the V1. Now, of course, there's other apps available for the V1 as well. There's JBV1, which introduced auto lockouts for the Android, and the V1. That app pretty much hasn't been updated in years, and it actually recently went open source. And so any of you guys who want to help create an app and you want to maybe take over where JBV1 left off, I'll link you in the video description to more information about that. And yeah, JBV1 is now open source. You guys can go in and maybe fork it, create a new version of it, or continue updating the app, whatever you like. Now, for iPhone users, we really only have one awesome app. It's V1 Driver. It's a $10 app that adds auto lockouts and low-speed muting and a lot of the similar functionality. It doesn't have all the crazy cool features of JBV1, which I think is why it doesn't get talked about as much. And I even did a video a little while ago talking about the V1, and I actually didn't give it enough attention because I was so focused on JBV1. Now, it's the iPhone version of the app that adds auto lockouts and stuff, and it's also available for Android too, so I wanted to point that one out as well. Now, there's another app that's available that's not a V1 app. It's called Highway Radar. And it also pulls crowdsourced information into the app, as well as aircraft information. So planes and helicopters in the air, it can notify you using ADS-B data and actually display that right in the app while you're running. For those of you guys who want more crowdsourced information or airplane data, you can download Highway Radar, and it does some of the similar stuff that JBV1 does. JBV1 does a lot more, and it also does some of this stuff differently, so if you're interested in that, maybe take a look at both apps. Next, let's move on to laser jammers. Now, I talked about the ALP with the new hardware 4 CPU, the black one, as well as the new firmware update. 5.5.6, there's some bug fixes and there's some stability improvements, and there's also support for the new assisted radar filter functionality with the new hardware 4 CPUs. Big difference with the hardware 4 CPUs is they just add more memory to add in the new assisted radar filter, plus it's got the potential for some additional updates later on down the line that don't exist yet, but now it has the ability to add those in. Next, we've got the TMG laser jammer. The TMGs have been updated to 8.06. The biggest update to 8.06 is some improvements to the jamming algorithm specifically for the Stalker XLR and the Stalker RLR. They have also removed the algorithms for the Traffic Patrol XR, which isn't in use in the United States, and so that one's actually been removed now. I'm guessing it was because of maybe some false alerts that people were seeing, and so they just removed it. But yeah, it's no longer available in 8.06. Now, there's been some hardware changes with the TMG as well. They've got the new Gen 2 heads, which are just like the original generation heads, except they have modified the internal components to help improve reliability. Otherwise, performance and everything is going to be exactly the same as the original heads. Speaking of new heads, TMG has also announced that they are currently developing a new head specifically designed to help with VPR jamming, so pretty much similar to the ALP and its TX sensor. One of the weaknesses of the TMG is while it's good at jamming the Dragon Eye, it does kind of struggle at closer range, and the new VPR heads should actually help close range jamming capabilities. No ETA on when it should be available, but that is something that they're working on. Something else that they're working on is a motorcycle-specific version of the TMG. Basically, they're shortening the cables for the heads themselves. They're modifying the interface to be more friendly for motorcycles, and they're also working on some waterproofing for the CPU. No ETA on this as well, but it's also something else that's in development. Now, finally, TMG is also currently running a sale to where if you order a set of duals, you get a free third head as well. So upgraded to a set of triples for the price of a set of duals. So for those of you guys looking for an inexpensive yet effective laser jammer, this is going to be a really good bang for the buck. Plus, if you use the coupon code VORTEXUS, it'll give you free shipping when you order this set of triples. If you want a set of quads for front and rear protection, you can use the coupon code VORTEXRADAR, and it'll save you $70 off the price of a set of quads. Next, I'd like to take a look at some testing. Over the past couple months, there's been a number of you guys, fellow radar detector enthusiasts, who've gone out to do a bunch of different radar detector and laser jammer tests, and a bunch of them have actually been really interesting. We've been seeing things that we didn't know before, and so in this video, I wanted to share maybe just a few of some of the recent tests that have been posted on the forum. The first test that I want to talk about is some GPS lockout testing. This was a test that Haywood did, and in this test he tested with a K-band speed sign, which he locked out, and then he fired a K-band radar gun to see what would happen with the K-band radar gun. Would a detector lock out the radar gun because it was trying to lock out the speed sign, or would it maybe correctly alert to the second news signal, the radar gun, independent of the GPS lockout for the speed sign? Now, in this test, he used a number of different detectors from Redenso, Escort, and Uniden, and let's quickly go over the results and the differences between the different detectors. Now, against these two different K-band sources, which were just under 20 megahertz apart, let's go ahead and start with the results with the Redline EX. Now, the results here were actually kind of weird. When he tested in highway mode, the detector locked out incorrectly the radar gun along with the K-band speed sign. However, when he switched the detector into auto no-X mode, it actually did manage to alert properly to the K-band radar gun and give the user some actual warning.
So around, and there it is, 24133 is the sign. And marking it, starting the countdown. You can see it falling off. Still no signal from the Bushnell yet. And there it's picking it up. So 1,212.4 feet. And it's showing the Bushnell at 24.119.
In this test, he found that it worked much better in auto no-X than in highway mode. Now, moving on to the Uniden R3, in this case, the detector was able to always tell the difference between the locked out signal, and if you looked at the screen, you would see the second new signal. However, it would never audibly alert you to the second new signal, even though it knew that there was one. It was keeping the detector completely muted because it was in the process of locking out the speed sign.
And starting now, mark. went from 132 to 24 118, so it's showing the second one, but it's not releasing the first lockout.
And so yes, while the detector could tell the difference, it was not alerting the user properly, and you wouldn't know that there was a radar gun unless you actually looked at the detector's display itself. The Uniden R7 actually behaved the same way that the Uniden R3 did, with no audio alert, but it was able to visually show the difference with two signals, one locked out and one not. Now, the Uniden DFR9 behaved differently. It was actually kind of similar to the Redline EX. In this instance, it actually worked properly when run in highway mode and full sensitivity.
There it picks it up.
In city mode, however, the results were kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it would alert properly, but other times it would be completely muted and locking out the radar gun along with the speed sign. And so with the DFR9, the lockouts actually worked better in highway mode, which is the opposite of the Redline EX, which worked better in auto no X. But again, we're seeing differences between the different modes, which is very weird. Now, out of all the detectors that he tested, the one that actually performed best was the Redenso Pro M. In this instance, every single time the detector would always alert normally to the radar gun at a distance. Then once you started getting closer, it would then lock out the radar gun because it was locking out the speed sign, and then once you passed the speed sign, it would resume alerting normally. Now, while this isn't completely perfect, it always managed to give you a long distance detection in every single instance in every test run with different settings. And so in this test, the Pro M actually, it wasn't perfect, but it was the best out of all of these different GPS detectors. Now, he didn't test any of the V1 apps, which I think would be super interesting because the V1 apps do better at GPS lockouts than any of the radar detectors do, whether it's JBV1, JBV1, or V1 Driver. They are much more sophisticated at how they handle GPS lockouts, specifically with multiple signals simultaneously and showing you one signal locked out, but then alerting you to another signal and showing you a bunch of signals. And so I would have loved to see the test done with the V1, of course, and I think that would be awesome for somebody to do. I could do it too, I know, but I'd love to see more of you guys stepping up and doing the test as well. I think that would be super interesting to see. Now, the next test that I want to focus on is some K-band testing, specifically with a TSR on and off. Typically, you see a reduction in range and performance with TSR on, but that's definitely dependent on terrain. In some situations, you will see a difference. In some situations, you won't. Now, the Texas Countermeasure Testing Group posted some testing up recently with a bunch of different detectors, and let's quickly go over what they saw with K-band testing. Now, on this particular test course, as you'll notice, there wasn't a huge difference between TSR on and off. Typically, detectors did very similarly with it on or off. In one instance, the detector actually did better with TSR on, and that's a little bit of an oddball result down there from the Redline EX, as you can see, but in general, if anything, the detectors did do slightly better with TSR turned off, which is what we'd expect, but in this particular test, it wasn't a huge dramatic difference. Now, the most sensitive detectors were the Uniden R7 and the R1. No surprise, the R series are beasts when it comes to sensitivity, and, well, again, they had the longest range detections. Now, just behind there were the V1 and the Redenso Pro M. Behind those detectors was the Escort Max 360C. It was run in highway mode, so full sensitivity, no auto mode sensitivity reductions. Behind there was the Uniden R7 run at 30% sensitivity. In other tests, we typically see that the R7 is comparable to the Max 360C when run at about 50% sensitivity, maybe 30 to 50 depending on the test and whatnot. But in this test, we actually saw that the R7 was less sensitive than the Max 360C when the sensitivity was dropped down to 30%. Now, surprisingly, the worst performer in the test was the Redline EX. Despite it being a Redline and it's supposed to be super sensitive, even at full sensitivity in highway mode, regardless of TSR on or off, as you can see, it's actually trending down at the very bottom of the pack, which is, I don't know, kind of disappointing. This is a detector that I really wanted to like. It's got a lot of cool features with the Bluetooth and the RDD immunity. It's the best out of any of the windshield mount detectors, and I want to cover it when I go into the next video talking about the best radar detectors in the market. I want to talk about this a little bit more, but one of the disappointing things is, again, it's trending towards the bottom of the pack on sensitivity, unlike what we've typically seen with the original Redline, which was known for its long-range performance. In some tests, it's done better, but this is kind of a thing that we're just seeing with the Redline EX, so that was a little disappointing there with the Redline. Now, moving on to the rear sensitivity tests, the main benefit of having a second antenna pointing out the back, it's not so much long-range performance at the rear, but the detector can tell the difference between front and rear and then give you arrows. But they actually did some testing with a rear sensitivity. Unsurprisingly, the detectors that gave the longest range detection to the rear were the detectors that have a second rear-facing antenna. And you'll see it here with the Uniden R7, the Escort Max 360C, and the Valentine One all giving top marks for rear K-band detection. Then behind the dual antenna detectors were the single antenna detectors that only have one front-facing antenna. In that bunch, you'll see the Uniden R1 and R3, the Redline EX, as well as the Redline Pro M, which actually gave the worst performance for the rear detection in this instance. Next, moving on to some laser jammer testing, there was a bunch of testing done by you guys down in Florida, primarily with the TMG, and then also with the Adaptiv TPX motorcycle jammer. So let's quickly run through some of the latest tests from you guys in Florida. Now, this was really cool because there were a bunch of different cars that all had TMGs installed, and they tested with 3 different guns. There was the Dragon Eye Compact, the Stalker XLR, and the LTI TrueSpeed S. Pretty much what we saw with the results were in line with what we were expecting. It did pretty well overall. Against the Dragon Eye Compact, it did have some close-range punch-throughs, which is, again, exactly what we've been expecting. It does a good job overall at jamming the Dragon Eye until you start getting close. Now, with the TMG, there is a new variable pulse rate head that's in the works, very similar to how ALP has the new TX sensor that specifically helps with variable pulse rate guns. TMG is also working on a VPR head. No word on when it's supposed to be available or price or anything like that. That's still something that's in development, but that should be helping. And in the meantime, with the existing hardware, it seems to do pretty good against the Dragon Eye, but there are going to be some close range punch throughs. Now, they also tested with the Stalker XLR, and they found great performance here where it was jammed a gun, which is great news because 8.06, as we mentioned earlier, is supposed to help with the Stalker XLR jamming capabilities. Against the LTI TrueSpeed S, it was jammed a gun, which is also great to see because that's also, well, not necessarily also, but that's a very popular gun, more popular than you'll see like with the Dragon Eyes and whatnot. Next, we've got some Adaptiv TPX motorcycle-specific laser jammer testing. I had a chance to test it in my SUV, and there's been a couple tests here and there. In some tests, it's actually done really well, but there's recently been one test that I want to share with you guys, also in the Florida testing, where they found an issue. Now, in this test, they had the standard setup with 2 heads up front and then 1 head in the rear. Starting off with the Dragon Eye, it was actually jammed a gun against the Dragon Eye, so actually even better than the TMG, which is really good to see. So yeah, like what I saw in my testing, it did very, very good against the Dragon Eye. And surprisingly, with 1 rear head, it actually gave some jamming capability, which is not what I was expecting. It wasn't going to be jam from gun with the rear, but was actually giving you some jamming capability with 1 single head, which is really good to see. Now, unfortunately, it looks like they discovered an issue with the Stalker XLR to where they were getting some punch-throughs with the gun. The punch-throughs typically happen beyond maybe 650 feet or so, and there were some instances where it went jam to gun, but the majority of the time it was getting punch-throughs. And I think this is a different issue than what TMG was seeing, but they are going to need to address firmware update, or release a firmware update for the Adaptiv TPX to fix this issue. I don't know exactly what it is, but that has been reported to Adaptiv, so hopefully they'll be on it, and we'll get to see what their firmware update process is like now that, well, we found that it's needed. And then finally, against the TrueSpeed S, it was jammed to gun here as well. And so really good against the Dragon Eye, really good with the TrueSpeed S, and there is an issue with the Stalker XLR that does need to be addressed, and I guess we'll get to see now when that update comes out. So as you can see, there's been a bunch of really cool tests, and these are just a few that I wanted to highlight. You can hop on over to the testing section on RDF to see all the different tests that people have been posting. And now, last but not least, I actually want to share one really cool bonus thing that Dude in NZ posted for you guys in New Zealand. Now, a lot of you guys have been asking me, what's the best radar detector for some country? Israel, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, like all over the place. And things are so different all over the world that I can't take information that I get here in the US and apply it to the same thing you'll see overseas. However, Dude in NZ actually took the time to put all that information together for you guys, specifically if you live in New Zealand, and I'll link to that in the video description too. And it's awesome information to where if anybody ever asks, hey, I'm in New Zealand, what radar detector should I get? I'm gonna link to this, check it out. If you check out his thread, you'll notice he's talking about all the different radar guns that are in use in New Zealand. He goes over the different laws specifically for New Zealand, the best radar detectors that are available in your area with specific New Zealand firmware, the settings that you should run for your detector in your area, as well as a bunch of testing that shows how all these different detectors compare. Now, this is awesome stuff. This is, again, an enthusiast sitting down and taking the time to put all this really localized information together and compile it into one place to benefit everybody else in the country. And this is awesome. And anybody else who's in, well, any other country around the world, whether you're in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, the Middle East, wherever it is, if you are able to do this kind of stuff, this is super, super helpful. So if you want to put something similar together, go ahead and post it on the forums and then send me a link to your thread. I'm sure I'll see it on the forums anyway, but maybe reply to this video and let me know, hey, Vortex, I just set up something similar for Saudi Arabia or for France or Germany or whatever country you're in, and this would be super helpful. I would love to learn more, and this would be a great resource that I can then turn around and share with everybody else in your country who asks as well. So again, a big, big thank you to all of you fellow enthusiasts who've been taking the time to do testing and create a lot of really useful information for everybody here in the community. So, whew, I guess that's an update for the past 3 months or so worth of new radar detectors, updated radar detectors, laser jammer updates, testing even, international information, a bunch of stuff as you can see. So, whew. Anyway, now that that's done, let's go ahead and get this video edited up online for you guys, and we'll move on to the next video talking about top 10 best radar detectors available on the market. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.